Hello, friends. Let me ask you, have you ever flown across the country for the adventure of a lifetime, only to realize the airline yeeted all your gear into the void? Austin Reed did, but instead of bailing, he tightened his bootlaces and he hit the Appalachian Trail pretty much gearless and walked away with the trail name No Gear. And that's just the beginning. This episode's packed with fun stories, a whole lot of laughs, and some pretty funny unexpected twists, including an aid station incident that you got to listen to hear about. It was absolutely hilarious. We cover everything from backpacking mishaps to climbing Wyoming's highest peak, plus a deep dive into mental health, running, and Austin's journey to a master's degree in psychology. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. But first, a word from our sponsor. Before we dive into this conversation, I want to give a big ol' shout out to the sponsor of this episode of the Run From the Norm podcast, Fleet Feet Treasure Valley. Whether you're just getting started, a seasoned road rabbit, or a dedicated ultramarathon adventure enthusiast, the right gear makes all the difference. And you know what? The crew at Fleet Feet gets it. They know shoes, nutrition, hydration, training, apparel. Hell, they can probably even help you replace the brakes on your clapped-out 82 Honda Accord. But more importantly, they listen to make sure you get exactly what you need to keep moving forward. They will not try to sell you on something that you do not need. They want to help, and they want to see you succeed. With locations in Meridian, at the Village, and in Nampa on the Boulevard just off the Karcher Road exit, they're there to help. Fleet Feet Treasure Valley is more than just a running store. It's a community, folks. So stop in, see what they can do to get you headed down the right path towards running badassery, and tell them Jake from Run From the Norm sent you. Want more details? Then check out the show notes for more info. And with that, on to today's episode with probably one of the most kind-hearted people I know, Austin Reed. It's time to run from the norm. Austin Reed, thank you for sitting down to join me.
Sure.
We've been friends for a number of years, and I'm really looking forward to diving into a few things here. And I just want to start out with, give me 3 words that you think define you.
Oh, gosh.
And start off with an easy question.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's easy. 3 words that define me. Let's see. I think I just enjoy living life, adventure, and having a good time. I think that's probably how I'd describe myself.
You're a crazy partier.
I guess so. No. Yeah. That's a good question. I'm not really sure. Just put it in 3 words specifically.
It's a tough one to hit you with right out of the gate.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's,
for that.
So I had asked you to send me an adventure that you had went on that we could talk about, and then I wanted to ask you about one too. And so I'm going to be selfish and start with the one I want to ask you about first.
Okay.
And so I would like you to explain how one gets a trail name.
Oh, boy.
I'd like you to share what your trail name is.
Okay.
And then we'll get into the adventure that preceded getting this trail name. So let's start with, how do you get a trail name?
You are usually either given one or maybe pick your own. But I think I was probably given one more than I picked it. I don't necessarily love it exactly, but...
and it's generally if you're going to do a big hike, right? Through hike.
Usually it's part of the hiking community, especially through hikers. They tend to have trail names. So, my trail name was more given to me as No Gear.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was thinking it was Walmart.
That was actually my first
started?
Piece of it. And I'm like, I don't love that one. How about something a little different?
Your name, I did this and Walmart was here.
Yeah.
Okay, No Gear. What was the adventure?
Yeah. This name came about when I was going on one of my hiking adventures with some people that are pretty special to me now. April's uncle, Ike, who I'll probably reference a few times here throughout this podcast, but April's uncle, Ike, has become a close friend of mine, I would say. And he did the Appalachian through hike once before. Kind of his glory days now, I would say. But something I think he and I really connected through was this hiking. And we've done some adventures together. But so there was one year that he invited me to go on a section of the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, when was this? How long ago?
It's been 15 years maybe.
Oh, okay. It's been a little while.
It's been a while now. And so it was a section of about 80 miles. And I think over 6-7 days, I can't remember exactly.
And what was the stretch?
I can't remember our origin point in Tennessee, maybe Virginia. Yeah. I'm not always best about remembering some of the specific
as long as you remember the good times.
Yeah. The end point was in West Virginia, of course, where my wife's from, but it tends to be the midpoint at least the mental midpoint of the Appalachian Trail.
Okay.
Anyway, so I was pretty excited about this trip and spent a lot of time planning it, prepping, getting all my gear ready, buying new stuff, get my pack all packed up and ready. And
are you a planner in general, or was it just with this trip you wanted to make sure you had everything on point?
Not a super planner, but enough for kind of a longer hike like that.
How many days were you expecting it to take?
I think we planned for 7 days maybe, but it was
Quite
one of my
days.
longest days. Yeah, I think it was probably my longest time out backpacking. But part of the Appalachian Trail culture is crushing the miles, how many miles you can get. And I talked a lot about that. Just, but you gotta have lightweight gear, and I was trying to measure out my weights and get as light as I could. So had everything packed, prepped, and ready. And when I got on the plane, I put it in this plastic bag. So it's like I didn't know how else to really send it.
You checked it? Was it? Oh, okay, it was a check bag.
Yeah. Checked it. And then for my carry-on, I just had, those little rope, little backpack things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I had one of those just for my very basic stuff in it. I get to our destination, DC area, and my backpack didn't make it. It didn't come off the carousel, right?
When are you supposed to start the adventure?
Yeah.
Oh, you're off the plane.
We're going to drive. We're going to be
Oh,
driving from
jeez.
there and get started, right? So I had somebody meeting us there to pick us up that was going to drive us to the trailhead and head off. We get off the plane and start looking for my stuff, and it's not there. I'm like, okay, go talk to the claims people, and they're like, we'll see if it comes in the next day. And we're like, no.
You don't understand. We're going somewhere you can't reach us.
This is everything. How do you do a backpacking trip without a backpack? Everything I have, it's like my whole trip is dependent on this.
Oh, jeez.
My first thought was like, I can't go. And now I'll reference this guy quite a bit too, but Les, our friend Les, he's kind of this take charge kind of guy. He's one of Ike's friends that we've met and been on a few adventures with as well. But he took charge. Got some gear. We got enough for them to drop the bag off at our next stop where we can get off the trail and go into a small town after the first night.
And they didn't know where it was, though. The airline didn't know?
No, they didn't.
No idea?
No, they didn't know.
Jeez.
So usually those things show up after a day, right? That sounds good. But in the meantime, we will go to grab some things, just some basic stuff to get going on the trail. So like I said, I spent weeks just planning, prepping, get everything ready. And
they're just crushed at this point.
Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. So we went and stopped at Dick's Sporting Goods, and I got a backpack. And Les says, I'd lost my stuff before, and the airlines will reimburse you. So just get what you need. They'll eventually reimburse you. So I'm like, okay. So go on this quick spinning spree. I got a jacket, got a sleeping bag, got a backpack.
God, you lost everything.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't have anything. Yeah. Except for my little string backpack, right? Yeah. With just
I was going to say, what do you have in that?
Right.
Some snacks.
Yeah. I don't know. My wallet probably. I don't even remember what I had. So yeah. So I got a few basics with the anticipation I'm probably just going to get my backpack at the next town and go on from there, and I can ship my other stuff off home or something. But
so you're just getting bare essentials.
Yeah. All I had was sleeping bag, backpack, jacket. That's about it. Maybe a few snacks I think I got. And they're like, we have extra food. We can make sure you're fed and stuff. So we set off, on the trail, got dropped off. And I don't remember the first town we got to, but I thought Appalachian Trail towns are going to be like hiking towns. They're just so close to the trail. I envisioned, okay, there's going to be
down and
awesome
dirty
sporting goods stores. Once you get off, and it's like right off the Appalachian Trail, one of the most well-known
access to
trails.
everything that you'd need.
Yeah. Your big old REI store or something like that. We get off the trail and we have to hitchhike into town, which is typical. So get a ride into town, and the guy in his old beat up vehicle. But we're like, where's the closest sporting goods store? It's like, there's a store, we can drop you off here. And it was like, he drops us off. It's more like a hardware store.
Go in and get your hammer.
Yeah, right. And they had very little of what I needed there.
Not building the bridge.
Yeah. And so I snorted. He drops us off there, and that's not going to work. So we take a taxi and ask around. So there's a Walmart.
So this is where the Walmart comes into play.
Yes, this is where Walmart comes into play. And then once I got back into town, I called the airport, and they still hadn't found my bag. I'm like, okay,
You got to stock up now.
I've got to stock up.
Right.
This was our plan. My bag's going to be here when I get here.
Did you have shoes or boots and all that, or did you have to buy new boots and everything?
I was wearing my boots fortunately.
Okay.
I was wearing the clothes I was going to hike.
You always hear horror stories of people starting these long through hikes, and they buy like a brand new pair of boots or something, and it just eats their feet apart.
No, fortunately I had the boots and most of the clothes I was going to wear. You don't usually take a whole lot of clothes, but I think I did buy pairs of clothes. You usually don't need
just a few things. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm literally scrambling through Walmart and buying the essentials of what I'm going to need for the next 5 days, whatever it was that we're going to be on the trail. And again, I'd spend all this time planning, but it's like snacks, just grab
It's
this.
just panic. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it came about. It was my first big adventure on the Appalachian Trail, longest hike I'd done. And
What was your favorite part of it?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think the whole experience was pretty incredible. I think what jumps into my mind actually is, I don't know if you call it a hostel or this old big house that was probably about the 5th day or so in. After we'd spent several days hiking along, you could stay at this place and they had
Take a shower.
bunk beds, shower, and
How far off the trail are these towns and buildings? And
it varies. Sometimes you like hike through a town and
it's
just
part
watch
of the trail?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
part of
okay.
the trail. Sometimes hiking along. I remember hiking along a little bit of a highway to get across the road, and you're looking for the white blazes, they call it. The
next entry point.
Yeah, just follow the blazes. And this particular place was on the trail. It was right part of the trail. But it was just, I don't know what it was about. It was just this really cool old building that after spending several days and hiking hard, you come to this place and it was like for $10 you paid to get a whole frozen pizza and like a quart of ice cream.
Oh my gosh. Just feels like luxury.
Yeah. And you cook it yourself in the kitchen there, and then they have bunk beds and you just sleep and you can wash your clothes and move on. But
nice.
for some reason that was just one of the more memorable places. But
do you have to schedule it in advance, or it's just open when you get there?
That one I think was just open when we got there. I don't know that we planned it. We actually got there about a day ahead than we were planning.
Gotcha. I've never done the trail, so what's the trail like? Is it rocky, rooty? Is it dry, packed out?
Yeah.
Are you getting up on peaks?
Yeah. Well, I could describe this. It's oftentimes known as the Green Tunnel. I mean, it's going to vary because it's such a long trail, 2,000 miles, I think.
Yeah.
But the section we were on is definitely that Green Tunnel. So sometimes it's almost claustrophobic compared to what we see out here. But I think you described the trail pretty well. There's a lot of rocks. There's roots, hard packed ground. That whole experience was pretty magical. It's a different kind of hiking than we have out here west. It was more social than you see out here because there's so many more people. And even at that point, there was still, I think, cell service most of the way. You don't feel quite as remote. Like I said, sometimes you hike through towns, yet you're still remote enough into the woods and wilderness that you're just out there in nature.
You feel disconnected.
Yeah.
How often are you seeing other people?
Gosh, quite often, actually. There were sections where we probably wouldn't see people, but the other unique thing about the Appalachian Trail is coming up on the shelters. There's shelters every so often, which was another cool piece of it. I didn't buy a new tent. Yeah, so we stayed at some shelters. There was one night I just kind of slept under the stars, under a tarp, I think.
Do you have plans to go back and do more of it? Or you got it and you're okay?
Now, I would like to do another piece of it or section maybe someday, but we'll see. But it's not necessarily top of my list, but I would consider it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. I couldn't remember the name of it before, is where you ended. But I remember coming into that town, and it's a very historic town in West Virginia and, tied in with Civil War. And the trail literally goes right through the town. And what river? I can't remember the river you come up on, but just walking back up onto that is
absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, gorgeous.
And then you finished with all the gear that you bought, and then did the airline ever find?
Oh yes, the gear that I bought, I did. I ended up with all the gear that I had bought on the trail at Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods, and my backpack. I called in a few more times, but they never found it. So I just thought it was lost forever. And I spent a lot of time itemizing everything I had in my backpack. Hiking gear can get expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
And I submitted to the airline, and I did. I got a check from the airline. So I paid for my trip. And it was about a year after that, I get a call from the DC airport, their lost and found department. So it wasn't the airline.
We have this bag sitting here. It's been here a year.
Yeah. They're like, we thought I'd give it a chance because I had put a tag also on my backpack. So like I said, I initially put it in a plastic bag. The tag had come off the plastic bag part, but I did have my name on my backpack itself also. And so after a year, she says, "Do you want your bag back?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to have my bag back." It was like, everything is it.
You have to send back the money?
No. This was the best part. She says, if you just pay for the FedEx shipping, I'll ship it back to you. Because she wasn't part of the airline. She was part of Lost and Found at the airport. She said, if you just pay for the shipping, I'll just send it back to you. If I send it to the airline, they're going to make you pay it back.
Interesting.
So essentially I got paid for...
Yeah, they put you out. That's a lot of stress. That's your compensation for it.
Yeah. And the lady that I was communicating with at the airline, she was wonderful. So I was like, this is my whole vacation. It's like everything is in my backpack that's important for this trip. You can't just go on a backpacking trip without a backpack. Yeah.
What makes it that much more memorable?
Yeah. That was definitely one of my highlight adventures for sure. So
Nice.
you asked about what it's like, and I said social, but you meet some interesting characters. There's one guy we met, like I said, they always have trail names, right? We met this guy at one of the shelters, went by Disco. And he comes over to our shelter. He's, I got some cider and rum.
But you have to drink it out of this specific cup.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, sure, why not? But he was out there on his own, hiking along by himself. So he like offers cider and rum. And you want to be polite and take it, right?
Sure.
He pours it out and then mixes it with his dirty finger. like, okay.
Did he lick his finger first before he put it in there? I'm just going to clean it off real quick.
Yeah. He was just a character. He was just different. And he'd spent time
the stories that you would hear.
Yeah. Like in Mexico, I think it was, like working for the circus, and he'd been over to Thailand, and he wasn't that old. He was like 30 or less.
Just living a different life.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I always, and I don't know if you do too, but I always wonder, you start hearing those stories, it's what led you to this path that you were able to do these things. We're trying to pay bills and raise kids.
Yeah.
It's the wanderlust.
Yeah. So it's just people like that you run into on the trail, especially the AT. It's just, like I said, a social event. And
it's cool.
Yeah, he's just kind of random stuff. He would just come out with his, it's in Thailand, and you can shoot a cow with a bazooka if you want.
Okay, Disco. That's a quick, hard segue. And how do you know this? Are you shooting cows with bazookas in Thailand? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it was a heck of an adventure.
Yeah.
Is he the most memorable person that you met that wasn't in the party or anybody else?
I think he would take the top.
Yeah. Sounds like a good time. Anyway. Let's backtrack. Yeah. Let's start this thing back from the beginning.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
Okay, so I grew up in Gooding, Idaho, which is a small farm town, about 3,000 people near Twin Falls, Idaho.
Okay, so roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours from where we're at.
Yeah, it's 100 miles, almost exactly. So, you could run there, Jake.
Let's do it.
You would love to, wouldn't you?
Add that to my bucket list.
Yeah, so small farm town. So just a typical Idaho.
Were you on a farm or?
No, I was in town, so I was more of a town kid.
Yeah.
The gangs in our town was like, you got the farm kids, you got the town kids, you got the sports kids, and you got the
ones that causing trouble.
Yeah, right.
Hiding behind the dumpster.
I was a town kid. But I mean, you were friends with everybody in a town like that.
Yeah, so, 3,000 people.
Yeah.
What was school like? Were you into athletics or sports or?
Yes and no. I wouldn't call myself super athletic, but I just did a variety of things. But actually, as far as running goes, I did track when I was in junior high. We had junior high there, not middle school. And I liked it. But then high school came along and I did tennis, which overlapped with a track, or I probably would have kept doing track. And then soccer.
Why did you laugh at soccer? Yeah. I was going to let you slide on it, but I have to ask.
So I just kick out a soccer team there. If nobody knows about Gooding, and do you know the Deaf and Blind School? Have you ever heard of this?
No, but Tiff mentioned something about this, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
And I think every state has, I'm not sure, but there's a state deaf and blind school, and they have dorms there and stuff. Again, Idaho being a small town, we had a football team, and the deaf and blind school had a soccer team. Now, our school really wasn't big enough to have both. You can have football, and that's kind of it. So they would allow some of their students to play on our public school football team.
Okay.
And would allow the public kids to play on
their team. Are you just out there clotheslining these poor kids when they don't even know it's coming? You're a horrible person. Here we go.
We are so good. Yeah. So no, just to clarify that the blind kids, we didn't have any blind kids on the team. It was just the deaf kids. Yeah. So just to clarify, just be cruel.
Let's add that side note.
Yeah. But there were several of my friends that played on the team.
Gotcha.
So we had a great time. We weren't very good as a team.
Just out having fun.
Yeah. Our coach was great. He was from Chicago. He was a big, tough guy and from Chicago, played and talked about breaking kids' like slide tackle and stuff.
Why were you in Chicago and you're now in Gooding? Witness protection program?
Yeah, right.
What were you studying? Not to switch that off, but what were you studying in school? What were your primary topics that you were most interested in?
Oh, in high school?
Yeah.
I don't know if I had favorite topics in high school specifically, but I did pretty good in school.
Where did you end up going to college?
University of Idaho.
Okay, so you went to U of I.
Yeah,
okay.
went to U of I.
And what did you study?
Psychology.
Okay.
Yeah. And I kind of knew, I guess when you say favorite topics, I didn't have any psychology in high school, but early on had a fascination and interest in psychology.
Okay. I was wondering where that came into the picture.
Yeah. I think early on, I just started developing a real fascination and interest in the brain and understanding the power of our thinking and all that kind of stuff.
Was it a general psychology major?
Yeah.
Did you have a focus?
It was more general, I guess you would say. I think I knew even then that with a psychology degree, and oftentimes people say this, you really have to go on.
You have to get a master's.
Yeah. So I did have intentions after I graduated to get a master's degree.
So you did do that?
I did.
Did you get your master's from U of I as well?
No, I got it from West Virginia, Marshall University in West Virginia.
And how did you end up in West Virginia from U of I?
So a friend that I had met in college at U of I became a close friend. He moved out to West Virginia. His parents had retired and moved out there. So he started going to school out there. And he's, you got to come out here and visit and check it out. I said, you know what? You can do an exchange program. And so I went on an exchange program out to West Virginia University.
How does that work if you're in college and they do an exchange?
Oh, they're wonderful. They kind of an exchange program with a lot of universities where I pay the same tuition as I would at U of I.
Oh, okay.
And you can go to another university and all of your credits transfer back to your
I assume
college.
it's only select universities that you can choose from that partner in this program?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny because usually people go to Europe or South America. I went to West Virginia.
Well, from where you're at, from being in Idaho, that's a world away.
Yeah, so that's how I got out there. It was at West Virginia University and on the exchange program.
And you got your master's?
Oh, yeah. So did you ask how I got out to West Virginia?
Yeah, and it sounds like through that exchange program and through your friend, and now you're looking to get your master's because you want to...
Oh, okay. Yes. So let me back up. So that was a good question. So how I got out there to West Virginia that's where I got my wife.
Right.
So
went and picked her up.
Yeah. So I went out to West Virginia and actually had a year after that. I had to come back to U of I and finish my degree because I was on the 5-year plan.
Hey, it takes as long as it takes.
Yeah. But anyway, when I was out there, that's when I met April at West Virginia University where she was going and met her and loved my life. And
you guys isn't it 30 years now?
Yeah. This year will be 30.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up going out there. And so I had to come back to U of I to finish a year. So we had a long distance relationship. And yes, I had to go back out there to get her. And so I moved out there after I graduated. She wasn't finished with school. And while I was out there, I, started working a little bit, but I applied for Marshall University out there.
So were you trying to be a professor then at that point?
No, it was a counseling degree. Yeah, mental health counseling degree.
Okay.
College I applied for was West Virginia Graduate College, and it was an independent graduate college. But about a year after I started there, I merged with Marshall, right? Which was to her dismay because Marshall and West Virginia are like oil and water.
Yeah.
You can't be a fan of one and not a fan of the other. But she still accepted me.
Your endearing qualities.
Yeah. So I do have a degree from Marshall University, which...
You just don't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got out there and you brought your wife back and you guys decided to move back over here. And then where does your career go at that point?
Yeah. So I spent a total of about 4 years out there, I think.
Are you looking to be a counselor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I moved out here and initially it was like case management and stuff for really severe mentally ill people. And then worked with St. Alphonsus. It was called a Franklin Crisis House, but it was, again, kind of people in acute mental health crisis. So it's all the gamut of mental health issues in that setting and placement.
And what's your role in it? You said case management. I don't know if it changed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. After that, when I started working with St. Alphonsus, my role changed a little bit. It was more like a technician role because I still wasn't licensed yet at that point. I was still working on getting my license. But our role was to meet with patients, get their history, take their information. And it was still some case management stuff, helping them get set up with community resources after they left, that kind of thing. But it was, as far as an educational experience, it was probably one of my greater experiences with understanding probably some of the sickest of the sick mental health conditions and disorders. I mean, you really saw all of it. So
I bet.
Yeah. So
how do you, or maybe you don't, can you create separation from that? I can imagine it's such an immersive experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can just say done and clock out and you're heading home. Are you able to find balance there?
Yeah.
Does it become overwhelming?
At times it could. I think I always did okay with that. And you certainly have a lot of emphasis on how do you separate and keep yourself healthy. I think I've always done pretty well with that.
So if you're somebody with that training and that background, Would you seek out that help yourself then to help you maintain balance?
Absolutely. And eventually I did start doing some individual counseling. And
you
with
did?
my degree, yeah, I had a practice for a while, independent practice, and did some of that. But that's a good, it's interesting you asked that. And I appreciate a lot of the people that have come on here, and including yourself, that have talked about their own journeys with mental health. It's just my own self-disclosure. I had some pretty deep depression episodes and times in my life. And I even after I'd been through graduate school and studied this stuff, I didn't realize what it was until I was in counseling. Yeah. I was at a very deep place. It wasn't too long after we'd moved here. And
you don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but what was it that led to that? Or did you feel this kind of rustling when you were younger? Or was it something that just the stress of life?
In hindsight, yes. Once I kind of realized I had depression and looking back, I could see times in my life where I had depression episodes.
Are you harder on yourself because you're going through it, but you have the training and the knowledge to where you maybe feel like you should be able to work your way through it because you understand it from a training and clinical background?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't say I was harder on myself. I think it gave me a different insight to it.
Probably gives you some empathy that somebody that doesn't experience it might not have when they're dealing with other people.
Yeah, I was probably more forgiving of myself than hard on myself. At the same time, I did have that feeling of shame too.
I didn't think about that because if that's your background and that's your profession and you're experiencing these things too, I can imagine that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is, as much we preach and talk about, it's okay. It's just who you are. It's when you experience it, and nobody wants to be broken. And even still, it's like, it feels to some degree, there's just part of you that's not quite
something's wrong with me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But when I first really recognized it, I was already working in the field. I already had my master's degree, and honestly, everything in my life was good. And I know you've talked about this too, but I still remember just being curled up on the floor. Your world is just
dark and heavy, and you don't really know why.
Yes. And for me, I think the best word that describes it is anhedonia. I don't know if you've heard that word.
No, it's
a kind of
word. Anhedonia.
Yeah. And what it means is lack of pleasure. And that captures it so much for me, because when you're in your deepest state of depression, you can't experience joy.
There is no joy. That's interesting.
And
anhedonia.
Anhedonia, Anhedonia. Because I think it's different than sadness even.
Right.
It's not sadness. Depression is different. It hurts. And
that's a great point. It does. It's physical.
Yeah. And so now in hindsight, and knowing what I know now, it's easier to deal with, but especially in the moment when you're in that depth. And again, that depth when you're not experiencing joy at all.
Right.
You can't access that part of yourself.
I think, and I don't know about you, but I think one of the worst things about it is when you can see it and you are aware, but you can't change it. Well, I need to think my way out of this, or I need to rationalize my way out of this. It's almost like the feeling has to run its course. And I don't know about you, but for no rhyme or reason, you might wake up just right and the sun comes up and it's a beautiful sunrise and boom, you're out of it.
Yeah, I didn't quite have that though. Not when I was in the depth of it. It was just because I was like, everything really in my life is good. I was married. I was working. April was working. And I mean, I had a good upbringing. It wasn't anything I could really pinpoint to, but like you said, I was trying to find the core of it, find something that triggered it. And so I started seeing a counselor, and she's the one that said, I think you have depression. And again, I had training, but I didn't recognize that's what it was. It was bizarre.
I bet. So how did you start working through it and dealing with it?
Yeah. So for me, she's like, I think you ought to consider medication. And coming from counseling, I thought you work through something. You have to.
It's all talk therapy.
Yeah. But I was so miserable, so I was willing to try anything. So I'm like, okay. And my dad actually had some mental health struggles too. And he'd already been seeing nurse practitioners, a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And so I went to see her and started on some medication. Now, I think I'm one of the lucky ones, because for me, it was like Zoloft, and I'm still on it. That was well over 20 years ago. For me, it was night and day. And it takes a while. It takes a few weeks for it to really start to, and which is the frustrating thing with medication, is you have to wait to see if it's going to be effective for somebody who's just not.
Kylie, I just talked to on the last one, she was discussing the medication journey of having to try these different things and figure out what works and what the dosages are. And
Exactly. And I've worked with a lot of patients that seen it from the outside as a professional. It's miserable because there is a lot of trial and error to it.
Let's say it's practicing medicine.
Yeah. And just where we are in science and everything, it's not a perfected science yet.
Let me ask you something. This just popped into my head, and I don't want to put you on the spot on this, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but where do you think we are right now with mental health and medication treatment? Do you think that we're quick to diagnose? everybody has ADD or ADHD now, and we're quick to put people on medication instead of maybe starting with a discussion of, okay, let's figure this out first. I don't know, what's your take on that from a professional standpoint?
I think you have to really look at it from a science perspective.
How do you mean?
So there's a lot we still don't know, but there's a lot we do know. Medication-wise, for a lot of mental health conditions, as far as statistics go, it's one of the more effective treatments. Does that make sense? But so is cognitive behavioral therapy. And people sometimes are surprised by this, but for those people who are, you call them treatment resistant, who've really tried a lot of medications and especially for depression, one of the more effective things to really treat that is ECT, electroconvulsive therapy.
I use my TENS unit on my body. Should I stick it on the side of my face?
I wouldn't recommend that, but yeah.
I don't know if it's helping.
Yeah, you can try, but yeah.
Totally just derailed the
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm sure there's just a lot to unpack there. It's not an easy answer. I think, like you said, there's so many variables and everybody's different. Everybody has to figure out their own solution to it. I don't know if
they do. But at the same time, I think the thing with depression, obviously my own personal journey, but also my professional journey, I can understand that more than anything. But when you're in the middle of it, you're scared. And that's one of the symptoms of it is hopelessness. But it's really reminding people that it's a treatable condition. And now the treatment can vary. There's different ways. But at some point, though, your body eventually will pull out of a depressive episode, eventually even without any intervention.
And that's where I was saying it's not necessarily a light switch, but for my experiences, it might last a week or 2 or 3. You never really know. But then there could be for no reason at all, with no medication involved, suddenly just something happens and you break out of it and the weight drops a little bit.
Yeah. And have you heard of the term homeostasis? I tend to think of it like that. I think our body tries to eventually adjust chemically to get back to that normal state.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that people, from what I understand from the research we know right now, eventually people will come out of it. It's just about a matter of when, but I don't know. It's a complex subject.
I'm sure it is. And that could be a topic that could last hours on its own. So let me turn it a little bit. How do you feel about exercise as a treatment? We talk about running specifically.
Yeah, invaluable. And, when you asked me to come on, I started researching a little bit more about it, but I know how it's affected me. Certainly has been a life changer for me from just reading the studies and research. And I think we all experience this. It's one of the best natural antidotes that you can do. And I always sometimes wonder if running is even more than other forms. They say any kind of physical exercise, especially aerobic exercise, is beneficial for your mental health. But I don't know. For me, there's something magical about running.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the research backs that up.
When did you start moving back into running? Was it something you did for the mental health?
Yeah.
Was it exercise? Did you just decide, hey, I want to set a goal and go run a marathon?
Yeah, so my running journey, if we can get back into that's fun reflection, it ties a little bit more back into my hiking adventure story. So I'd mentioned April's Uncle Ike and friend Les and some of these guys. If I can back up to that a little bit, because that's kind of where it started. And actually back up to when I first went out to West Virginia with this friend I told you that kind of recruited me out there. He's the one that kind of introduced me into backpacking. And when I was in college. And at the time, it was just the most fascinating thing. Again, I'm small town, haven't seen much of the world, and backpacking was just something I never even thought, I didn't even know about it. And so he started dragging me out in the woods, and I bought my backpack and my gear, and we just on the weekends go hike around in the woods. And I was so fascinated by it that you could just be out there with everything on your back to survive for a few days.
However long.
Yeah. And kind of just sparked a passion, I guess. And I'm really lucky too, because then when I met April, she would come along with me. And so we kind of started doing some backpacking stuff. And so early on, backpacking was a pretty big passion of mine. I'm not saying not a ton of it, but it was enough.
It was sparking something that you're enjoying this time outside.
Yeah, exactly. So being outside, just adventuring. And so her Uncle Ike, who's an interesting fella, he was out visiting us once, and I was showing him all my backpacking gear, and he was fascinated by it.
Check out my stuff.
Yeah. And he decided he wanted to take up backpacking. He lives in Florida. He decided that he was going to through hike the AT. So he planned it for a few years and started buying his gear and
getting his plan in order.
Yeah. And so he ended up doing that. He through hiking the AT.
Oh, wow.
Ike was also a pretty avid runner. He's involved with a running group out in Florida. And through that, he started talking with one of the guys that they run with, Les, who they realized they had a kind of common connection with hiking. Les is another extremely fascinating, interesting guy. He had a goal of completing all the 50 high points in the States.
Oh, wow.
And Les was just one of those people that just, he has goals and he's going to do it.
He's going to figure it out.
Yeah, he's one of those highly motivated, fun people to be around.
Has he done it?
He lacked Denali.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, he lacked Denali. But this kind of all ties into how I started running, but I'll get there. So Les and Ike, they developed friendship around hiking because Ike's, I hiked the AT and Les was doing these high points. And during one of their conversations, Les still needed to do Idaho at this point, right? And Ike's like, I have some family out in Idaho. And so he called us and we're going to come out here and do Idaho's Bora Peak. And do you want to join us? So that was the kickoff of this series of adventures of high points that we started doing.
Okay. And when about was this?
Over 12 years ago.
Okay, so it's been a little while.
Yeah. And so that was kind of our first adventure with Les. Les was bigger than life. I don't know. There's something about this culture of people who do extreme things. There's so many of them are just fascinating people. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you see that a lot in the running community, I think. And it's one of the things I enjoy so much is just meeting these people who are just ambitious.
And hearing their stories.
Yes, hearing their stories. Again, that's why I think just captivated by your podcast is hearing these people's stories. They're just some amazing people, what they do, what they accomplish, but there's an energy to them, a positivity. Les was one of those. I think he was the epitome of it.
You're saying in past tense.
Yeah. So Les was
obviously a huge impact to you.
Yeah, he really was. He was one of my heroes. And anyway, he came out, and so Les's background, I've talked a little bit about him because he was, I think, an impactful person in my life and anybody's life, whoever he touched. I know it was Ike's too. He was an engineer, so he worked for Enron at the time before they collapsed, and then he started working, but he was like into that field. But he was one of these people, I think, probably one of the most curious and people that I've ever met. And by that, you'd be driving along. I remember we were driving along out here, and he's, oh, what's that? There's a pipeline over there. Can you stop? Because I want to see what company that is. The most
random things.
Yeah, random things.
Most people would just flash and miss it. Interesting.
Yeah. And on the AT, when he was one of those, it's like, we're walking along and we get to this little bridge and he's like underneath the bridge. And I have this favorite picture of him because it just, again, encapsulates him. He's pointing with his hiking sticks. Look at that turnbuckle. A turnbuckle.
Of all the things to see out here.
Yeah, so fascinated by it. Just the littlest things. And
like somebody that's just very much just present in the moment, that they are taking it all in, not lost in thought about future or past. They're in it and seeing everything.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
Awesome. So
Les, and in his running group, they called him Professor, super smart guy, and just into everything. He had this big old massive satellite dish and something with bouncing sound waves off the moon. And I don't know, just another one of his hobbies. But one of his hobbies was doing the high points. And so that kind of kicked off this series. And so after that first one, Bora, which I didn't do, I didn't summit Bora.
Did you get past chicken out?
Exactly. No. And I don't like terrified of heights, and it stopped me. It's
a scary section. There's anybody that's been up to Bora and seen chicken out. It's a sketchy section.
Yeah,
and if heights bother you, it can
and make
you question whether you want to go up.
Yeah, there's something for me. I think I tend to do a lot of things that I push myself only so far, but I still tend to stay in that kind of pleasure zone. If it's not any fun anymore, I'm done. And that's where that was my thought process when I hit that point. I was like, probably close to come to a panic attack. I was like,
oh, geez.
I am so anxious. I was like, this isn't fun.
Not enjoying it anymore.
I'm done. April went on to do it, and there's an incredible picture of her hanging off the side of a cliff that she probably in a precarious position. But anyway, that was a side point. But anyway, that we did that, and then for a few years after that, he had to pick up these other high points, right? And we went on to do a few of these others.
Is this where Gannett Peak comes in?
Yes, Gannett Peak came into that. So Mount Whitney, Gannett Peak.
We're getting off from running, so we're going to have to get back to that. Let's go to Gannett Peak. Tell me why Gannett Peak is so impactful to you, because this is the topic that you wanted to make sure that we touched on.
Yeah. So it was like that era, doing these high points with Les in particular, but usually Ike and Les. And Ike was great at recruiting other Floridians in the running group to come on these adventures too. So we met several of his running buddies doing that. But so Gannett Peak, actually, in my mind, that's the kickoff of my running interest.
Okay. And where is Gannett Peak?
It's Wyoming. So it's Wyoming's high point and 13,804 feet.
It's close to 14.
Yeah. Not quite 14, but, and again, Ike and Les, they're in this running group and they're both pretty exceptional runners. Now, they're like, Ike is like 14 years older than me and Les was a few more years, but they're in exceptionally good shape. They're
active and.
Yeah. When Les did Bora, like the week before that, he went out to he was talking about, I just got back from Hawaii and I did a marathon there and I did their high point and my legs were beat up. I'm like, dude.
So let's go climb Bora.
Yeah, so let's go climb Bora. So that kind of gives you an impression just how fit he is. And Ike.
Constant thirst for adventure.
Ike's done Boston and marathons and stuff. So they're extremely fit. Getting ready for Gannett, it's a pretty long endurance hike. It's when you look at the high points, some people say it's one of the more challenging ones, partly because it's so remote. So it's a 40-mile round trip hike. And so at that time, it's like I wanted to be prepared and ready. And one thing is I don't want to be miserable trying to keep up with these guys. And so that was when I started running a little bit more just to start to get ready for that trip.
Okay.
But the other part of that trip in particular was probably my biggest adventure and accomplishment as far as hiking goes. I have to say, mountaineering wasn't my favorite thing to do because I don't like heights. I don't like that kind of thing. I like to backpack. I like to be out in the woods, but
getting up on the ridge back up in the Alpine to get up on the peak, it's not.
Yeah, when it gets risky, I'm like, that's just not fun. It's like, because my fear kicks in. But this was pretty unique. So we hike in, and I think it was about a 5-day trip. So it was a pretty long trip, but you hike in after a couple of days and you're at a base camp. And so on summit day was probably the most incredible, challenging experience that I've had. I've never done an experience like this where you have to do cross some glaciers, ice axe, crampons. So that was my first adventure with that and my last. So that's why it was just so unique for me because it's, wow, this is amazing.
Completely different.
Yeah. We took off at 2:00 in the morning.
It's still just dark. You three?
Yeah, the three of us. Yeah. So Ike and Les and I. And so it's called Dinwiddie Pass, where we're camped. We have to hike up and over this pass that's snow covered at that point. We put our crampons on, hike up and over. And then you go back down and then cross this flat glacier. Now, before we went, Les had done some mountaineering before, so he was a little bit experienced with some of that. And Ike and I had never had any experience on glaciers. So before we left, Les is teaching us some pointers about here's your ice axe, and if you have to self-arrest with your ice axe, and
some things that are good to know.
Yeah, right. Never had a lick of experience.
Let's do it.
I probably shouldn't have been up there. And we're off with our ice axe and everything, and up over Dinwiddie Pass. And then as we're crossing this glacier, there's certain things that Les is educating us on while we're out there. Yeah, you got to be careful on these glaciers like this because there's snow bridges. You don't know if there's a crevasse that's been snowed over and you can just drop through. I'm like,
maybe I don't want to go.
Yeah, and so, and in the meantime, so you hear water rushing underneath you.
Oh, geez.
It's just you hear it going, and then we come up upon a crevasse, which was really cool. I'd never seen anything like that. So I'm like, wow, here's a crevasse, and it was probably 3, maybe 4 feet wide. I could always hop over it. And so we hop over it, and then Les says, you got to look down in it. It's amazing. I look down, I'm like, oh my God, I can't see the bottom. It's so deep.
Crazy.
I'm like, I just hopped over this. I could have
went right
one
down.
slip and you're done. So we get past that point and then hiking along, we're like, Les again mentioned, we're so high up here that at this point, it's like helicopter rescue is pretty much impossible. And which I don't know for sure if that's actually true, but
at that moment, it's true.
Thanks, Les. You're making us feel a lot better here. But and actually, when I set out, I didn't even set out to summit. My plan was just to go with them and go as far as I felt comfortable going.
Yeah, and hang out and let them finish.
Yeah, and if I hit a point where I was like, again, like with Bora, it just got scary. I wasn't gonna go. But
get what you want out of it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But I ended up going to the summit, and it was a huge accomplishment for me.
What made you keep going then?
I think I was out there. It was like, I never hit a point where I felt that terrified, right? And so I just kept going. It was fun. It's fun.
You're still enjoying it.
I was having fun with it. Yeah. And just the sense of trying to meet that accomplishment. But there were certainly some points where I probably should have been more scared than my body felt. There was one point where we were you come up where a point where you have to climb up, and I don't know what the degree of steepness it was, but it's steep. And you're with your crampons, you're climbing up this section, and then you go along a ridge to the summit. It's not too far to the summit after you hit that ridge, but it's a snowfield. If you slip at all on that snowfield, you're done. Because there's a cliff at the bottom of that snowfield, and coming back was a little bit more scary because it was starting to soften up, which is less is okay. Now, unfortunately, he had some knowledge of techniques, but it's like you have to face the mountain. You push in your ice axe. You're holding on to the top part of it, and it's almost like you're using it for a handle. Take a couple of steps down. It's almost like you're going down a ladder.
Oh my goodness!
Right? And again,
are you freaking out at this point?
I was just focused. Fortunately, I didn't have that panic moment. I just got to stay focused on getting
no other
down.
option.
Yeah. So I handled that one pretty well, and it got down past that one, and then we were coming back across another section. It was again fairly steep, and sidewinding back and forth. So when it gets steep, you just go across back and forth. On those sections, you shove your ice axe into the snow. You're holding on to the top part where the pick and stuff is, and you're using it almost as a handle. I had to experience my self-arrest skills.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was soft. It pulled out. My feet gave out. I started sliding, and the ice axe.
Are you tethered to each other, or
No.
you're solo?
I'm solo.
Oh man,
I'm solo, and Les gave us instructions. If you start sliding, you yell falling.
At the top of your lungs.
Yeah. So thank God he taught us how to self-arrest because I had to. And so I started sliding, and I was like falling. It's like self-arrest, and it does. It's like using a brake with your ice axe to slow you down and stop. And
oh my gosh,
the second time I did that, I could feel something with my shoulder give, right? Because it was pulled on my shoulder.
Oh yeah, you've got momentum. And you're trying to stop it.
And that scared me more because now my shoulder's messed up. It's like, I'm going to have to get back across this.
And you got to jump back across the crevasse too.
Yes, I have to. Exactly. I had to jump. And and that's I think part of it for me, that anxiety is I thinking ahead too. I still have to get across this glacier. I still have to get across this boulder field. Again, one of those other things that Les had said to us, oh yeah, you got to be really careful with these boulders. They can just shift at any point and they'll crush you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Les. And as I'm walking through one, it's like one of them shifts. I'm like, oh,
I'm going to die.
Just several moments in that whole trip, I'm like, died there.
Have you done any summits since that one, or was it the last one that you've done?
No, I have done some others, but nothing that extreme.
Yeah.
Nothing that extreme. But the other really scary point of that final trip was the flat part of the glacier. We're going back across it where Les had told us there could be snow bridges, right? Mm-hmm. There's a distinct trail where other parties had gone. And in the morning, we went on that distinct trail across the snow. Coming back, there was a hole right on the trail. And we looked down. I'm like, you can't see the bottom of this hole. I'm like, oh my God.
There could be a person down there.
Yeah, that's what we thought. We even yelled down it. There's somebody down there.
That just changes
It was an experience, but
sounds like an incredible trip.
Yeah. But that was the kickoff. I would say the spark of my running. And I really started running more to get ready for that, but it was out of fear. Like, I don't want to be left
so
behind.
Out of shape
I don't want to
keep up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when does it turn into something that you're doing more consistently? Because I want to touch on, you just finished doing a half marathon every month for the entire year this last year. Right. So where does this kind of casual runner turn into somebody who's, doing something like that? And where did that goal come from?
Yeah, and you asked me to come on here. I started thinking about just my whole running journey. Mm-hmm. And that kind of kicked it off, but I got a taste for it. And it's one of those, I guess as far as exercise goes, one of those things that just resonated with me more than any other form ever has. And so I started really thinking about, why is that? Yeah. Why did running do that for me? Because it's been consistent since then and built up. So from there, I started doing a few races. I just started enjoying it. And I listened, I think one of your last podcasts, I remember that experiencing that you have to get over that hump.
Yes. It's not fun right out of the gate.
No.
Yeah.
It's something, but I remember asking a running friend, it's like, when does it start getting fun? She's about 3 miles when you can do that consistently.
Yeah.
And I think that was true for me. Once I could finally get past whatever that hump is.
Yeah. The first mile always sucks. Your breathing's ragged. Just everything feels like crap. And to your point, you have to get to that point where you can get over, but it takes a while to build up to that also.
Yeah. But since then, it became such an important part of my life. And I didn't think about it too much until recently why. And I think what I keep coming back to is it's just it just is enjoyable. It's fun for me. And
people look at me crazy when I tell them that, because I love to run. I truly enjoy the way my body feels when I'm moving, whether it's fast or slow, different terrain.
Yeah.
Except for concrete. Concrete hurts.
Yeah. And I don't even mind that now. It's like, I just, there's something about it for me that it just feels good.
So where did the half marathon every month for the year come from?
That just goals. I think as you've talked a lot about this, just setting goals and having goals in mind. It was like
keep yourself motivated.
Yeah, just usually, what do I want to try to accomplish this next year? And you have a word for that. Like,
the Misogi.
Yes, the Misogi. I do that, and so it just became what do I want to do this year? So I think maybe I want to try to do half marathon a month and part of it was just the goal of trying to keep up a little bit longer distances going, because for me, I wouldn't say I'm the most motivated runner. I'm still pretty average as far as runners go.
How much do you run a week, and how many miles would you say, or how much time?
Probably, and it depends on if I'm training. Obviously, I'm running a little bit more, but anywhere from 2 to 4 probably times a week. But I've been very consistent with that almost since 2012.
Well, and you guys are right next to the hills too, so you can head right out and hit a trail.
Yeah. So I've definitely maintained some consistency, but I don't even know if it's that intentional. It's just because I like to and I want to.
Speaking of intentional, you've done races, you said, and at some point you intentionally signed up for an ultra.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many you've done, but Weezer River comes to mind.
That's my one and only. That was absolutely the hardest challenge of my life as far as running goes.
Why is that? What made it so difficult?
It was exhausting.
Yeah. It's a unique challenge for sure. And that course specifically, I think that one becomes almost more mental, where it's old railroad track and it's pretty flat, just that constant, whatever, 0.5% grade. It just, your body's in that same repetitive motion for 50K, 32 miles.
Yeah.
It's hard. You start getting those latter miles and it wears you down. How did you prepare for it?
I think I've not been that great about having I'm bad with this. I'll have a general kind of plan in mind and follow, but I think for most of my running, it's usually trying to just incrementally increase my distances, right? Because early on, I kind of read it's one of the most important things you can do is make sure you maintain your long runs and try to incrementally 10% increase. So I've always kept that approach generally in mind, but I'm not too strict on during the week, I have to
go by
how
much time you have and how you feel.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I prepared and just started out trying to push my mileage and get my mileage up and increase it incrementally.
So you go from backpacking to where you're getting into an ultra. How does your gear preparation and gear planning, what does that look like? What's your nutrition and hydration strategy? What kind of stuff are you taking with you?
Chews and gels generally is kind of what I've done.
Austin, do you take any clothing with you? You know where I'm going with this.
Okay.
You know what?
Okay.
Is there specific?
This isn't something I usually prepare with, but.
So what unique items might you have taken on this race with you?
I have to say, every race I've signed up for and done, I've not had a DNF. And granted, I haven't done the distances you've done. I think that's a whole different ballgame.
Either way, it's all hard.
Yeah. But the Weezer River was probably the closest I ever came. I started out, I was feeling great, and I probably started out too strong for me. And I think it was probably, I think it was close to 20. And the funny thing is, it was a station where Jeremy and
Brandy?
Brandy.
Okay.
They had an aid station there, which was fun.
For those that don't know, Jeremy and Brandy do I'm Tough, them a classic. They're RDs for some legit big mountain runs. And
so I'm actually right in front of their station. And coming into that, I'd actually talked myself out of it. I'm like, I think I'm going to drop because I just felt like I was like, I
just wasn't
too
working.
much. Yeah, my legs were too exhausted. I was like, I don't know if I can do this one.
Sometimes it's just not the day.
Yeah. So I come into that aid station, and April, my wife, she's my biggest cheerleader. I come up, I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. And the cool thing was, one of my cousins, who's from Weezer actually, was there. And I didn't, not for me, but he was doing one of the, what do you call it? The relays.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So he's doing one of the relays, but he was at this aid station. I was like, oh, Jeff, my cousin. And April was there. And so I was talking with him, I'm like, I think I'm going to stop. I can't do it. And he was like, no, you can go on. You can do it. You've been training for this. Just maybe lighten up your pack a little bit. Let me take some stuff out. I'm like, okay. Again, right in front of the aid station. They didn't see me to do this, but just stick some.
What did you have in your bag?
I start pulling stuff out, and a pair of underwear comes flying out. Yes, that's what that's what you're fishing for. Yes,
you are planning for everything.
You have to have contingency plans.
Yeah, some people do. Paper towels, or you lose a sock. You're going for a fresh change.
Yeah,
I'm just going to put it flat because you never know when shit's going to get real.
Oh my God. It was
I love it.
Right in front of God and everybody. My underwear come flying out, plopping on the ground, right in the aid station. I look up at my cousin. I'm like, you just never know.
God, I love it. I can only imagine everybody's faces. But hey, you take what you think you need.
I don't even know.
Oh, I love it.
It wasn't like something I usually planned. I think it was one of those last minutes. Oh, maybe I'll need this.
I might need some underwear.
Yeah. I mean, 'cause you know what happens.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're out there running.
You never know. I mean, things could go south real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny. So your next running goal, you've done an ultra now. You did your goal for the half marathon every month.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific running goal right now?
Yeah. My next actually is I'm actually training for a full again. This will be my second full. So full marathon.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
which one are you targeting?
The Tater.
Okay. The Great Tater.
Famous Tater.
That's actually my fastest marathon is on that course.
Yeah. Because I did one of those, and then I did the 50K, the Weezer River 50K, and those are my two longest. But I've been wanting to do another full.
So what adventure is at the top of your bucket list right now? If you could go anywhere and do anything, is there one thing that's just like, I really want to do that and you haven't yet?
Probably a lot of them. I think people are starting to shift a little bit more into traveling kind of stuff. But
yeah,
so
you guys have done some awesome trips.
Yeah,
you guys went to Germany this last year, I think, and
Paris and London.
And where are you going this year?
We're going to go back to Paris.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going back to Paris. And I guess another thing that's kind of on my bucket list, and I'll say it out loud here. I always feel like if I say it out loud, I'm going to commit.
Absolutely.
Right? I want to do the I'm Tough 20.
Yeah, the 20, it takes you up over jugs.
Oh, we've
all collectively. We've swept it. We've done Louis.
And just that gave me a huge appreciation for what the runners do. I'm like, it kicked my butt just hiking and sweeping the trail.
Yeah, and that's something I hadn't even thought about is all the volunteer aid stations that we've done together. Louis Lake and Duck Lake for I'm Tough. Yeah. And I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit trail we could go on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, all those things. But, I think, again, that kind of ties back into, though, I think April and I have been really fortunate to have connected with these people who are inspirational, right? Les and Ike and April, she got into this hiking group of ladies that are just exceptional. But there's always something about that group of people that are just inspiring. They're positive. They're fun to be around.
It's finding your tribe. It's finding your tribe, the people you align with, building that community, because it really does motivate you to get out and do these things even more. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
It's been an incredible journey in that sense. Yeah.
So you got some travel on the horizon then?
Yeah, some travel.
Focus on the marathon, and that's the target.
Right now it's that. I just want to keep running. It's just something I enjoy doing, and I want to keep enjoying it for as long as I possibly can. I mean, some of the most inspirational people, I think, when I've been in races are those 80-year-olds that are still plugging away. I'm like, I want to be that.
Absolutely. It might take them twice as long, but it almost adds to the difficulty of trying to just get to the end.
Yeah.
It's the journey that everybody's on.
Yeah. Right.
And that's one of the things I love about the trail scene and the ultra scene is everybody cheers just as loud for the person that comes in first as they do for the person that comes in, at the tail end.
Yes. Yeah. And speaking of that, when I did the Weezer River, I, kind of a low moment, but I was like, I am out here alone. Am I last? And it shouldn't matter. But
all the things you think about, especially if you're at a low point.
Oh my God, I'm last. And part of it, again, having worked aid stations, I'm like, all these poor aid people, they're waiting for me.
Waiting for me to get through.
Like I am the one that they're waiting for. I hope not. It's like, I was back there.
Oh, funny.
but I finished it.
It's all an experience. Yeah. And hopefully you still had your underwear with you.
Yeah.
Wipe your face off. I don't know.
I never did need to use it, just to clarify.
Too funny. Well, Austin, you've been a good sport. We've been going for a long time, and I think we probably have some dinner waiting for us downstairs. But I want to ask you a couple questions to wrap this thing up. One of them is just, I'm curious, with your training in your education, do you ever use your psychology tools on your kids or your wife? Can you admit that while we're recording?
I got to plead the fifth on that. Okay.
I can't. Okay.
They're going to listen to that.
All right.
But
do you think about those things, though, as you're interacting even with family? I always wondered about that. With somebody that has a clinical background or that training, are you always in that headspace as you're interacting with people, like thinking about I don't know, all the different things and how to respond. And
maybe not in the way that most people kind of think, but it's actually a great question. I think it is definitely a part of me, though, in how I interact with people and I guess try to approach people. You know, I mean, it's like I try to apply what I would.
It's not like you can just shut it off. Yeah. I've always wondered about if your training or background or experience would come into play.
So I guess, for example, does it change how empathetic I am? Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was born with a lot of that already. I probably credit my mom a lot to that. But it certainly enhanced that, and you think about it more, but also try to also set that example of just, you can't change the world around you. You can only change how you react to it. And trying to live that and impose that on myself, my kids, anybody, is probably kind of central to just part of who I am.
Yeah.
I think that's just part of my whole existential purpose, I guess, for me, is just trying to live life and enjoy as much of it as you can. You know, our life is finite. We only have so many days on here. So how do you stay in that headspace? How do you stay in that positivity as much as possible? You know, whether it's through adventure, whether it's through your thoughts, whether it's through connections with people.
Do you read books at all? Or I'm a bookworm and I'm always deep diving.
I
was going to ask if you had like one specific book that meant a lot to you over the years that
you've touched on some of them here. It's more of the adventure books, you know, Shackleton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
More of those. I think I've probably been more fascinated by it. But as far as self-help, I don't know if there's any one that stands out so much, but
that's a great point. And actually, I'm trying to be better about engaging more with the stories again, because it's so easy to get lost in these deep books that have so much content that you're trying to digest. It just turns into mental fatigue. I think it's really good to mix those up.
I guess the one book maybe that sticks out to me, I don't know if it's the concept of it, it's called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, you know, just how your brain works and functions. And it's a fascinating topic to me, but I don't necessarily read a lot of the books on it. Actually, I tend to listen to a lot of audiobooks, but it's just more fictional, just kind of entertaining, you know.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough credit given to just remembering that we have to also digest entertainment. Things that just make us feel good or make us think, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be the heaviest of content.
And I think, again, that's kind of just this whole existential purpose. You know, running is a huge piece of that. It's like, you know, the connections I have, even, again, our thought process is a huge piece of that. That's probably harder. It's in theory, it sounds simple, but it's literally what channel you tuned into with your thought process, and how do you change that to keep you in that positive headspace? Because do you want to stay miserable more of the time than not?
Yeah, and I think it can change, like we've talked about, it can change throughout your life based on different variables and influences too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's another rabbit
hole. Just kind of curious about that. Okay, so we've come to the last question, but I definitely am curious what your answer is. What does legacy mean to you, and what's the legacy that you want to be remembered for?
Yeah. I heard you ask this a few times, and I think for me, what I want to be remembered for is more about, I hope that I've given those people that are important to me the same equal positive, good memories, good times that they've given me. Whether it's family, friends, my kids, I've gotten so much joy out of those people that are so important to me. I hope I've done the same.
I think you are an absolutely kind individual. You truly have a genuine heart, and you and April are, favorite couple friends to hang out with and adventure with, and we always have a great time, which we could go off on titanium sporks and there's so many ways we could go with this, but I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and let me ask you a bunch of questions and being so open and vulnerable and transparent. It's been a blast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and it's probably about time that we wind this thing down and get ourselves down to do some eating, so we'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Austin.
Yeah.
And that wraps up another episode of the Run from the Norm podcast. Thank you to my good friend Austin Reed, and thank you, dear listener, for sharing your time and listening to this episode. I hope you were entertained and found at least a nugget of inspiration in this conversation. We had a ton of fun. If you're enjoying what we're doing with this podcast and want to learn more, please do a pointer finger keyboard peck and type in www.runfromthenorm.com into your favorite web browser, and then slam that enter key like you mean it. You'll find all kinds of fun ways to waste a little time, including a link to sign up for the monthly newsletter, where I will personally send you a short wrap-up of all that has been shared in the prior month, things like new podcast episodes you may have missed, links to some humorous blog posts, maybe a bad joke or two. Who knows? You never know. I'll put everything in there. You can even contact me directly and tell me exactly how you feel about what I'm doing, good or bad. And with that, I encourage you to remain curious, keep moving forward, and get outside and run from the norm.
Check the mic, make sure it sound right, boy.